Good morning, everyone. Welcome to 3. Today we've got a special guest with us. But before we do that, a quick little plug as to why we're here. 3H is about hospitality, hope, and hustle. It is focused on bringing men in their 20s and 30s to a location to listen and hear from men our age, men who are older than we are, that can provide some insight and wisdom into how to create a life well lived, not just a life for ourselves, but a life for our family and for God, and what that looks like. So if you are interested in being a part of it, go ahead, like and subscribe, and join us on the journey together. Now, today's guest is, he's a very good friend, good mentor, kind of all the above, because he is my father. We got Ron Redlinger here today. So I'll go ahead and welcome you on. Welcome.
You, AJ? Glad to join you today.
Glad to have you. A quick little background as kind of my dad's career a little bit. Obviously, he knew me since I was very young, a very young age, and he's known me my whole life. So I'm sure that he's got some stories that maybe he's got tucked in there. But his life has been a very eventful, traveled tons, grew up in Michigan or Toledo, Ohio, Michigan, and then went to Bob Jones University. Met my mom shortly after. They moved to Thailand working for Graco Baby Products. Did some work there, had Shelly, and then went to Taiwan, had me, came back to Pennsylvania, and we've kind of moved all over the place, traveled a bunch with the company, and we'll get into a little bit more of the career side, but that's kind of a little background and kind of where we are now. Right? COO, yeah, of Gospel Link, which is it's a Christian organization that focuses on outreach and missions work, mainly missions work. Yeah, and make sure I'm getting it right. But yeah, like I said, we'll kind of touch on everything a little bit. But is there anything you'd like to add before we kind of hop into things?
No, I think that pretty much gives a good overview of the past.
Yeah. Well, good. I'm sure we could dive all the way back to your ancestry if we really wanted to, but for this one, I've got some topics that I think will be good, so that I'm excited about. So I think we're gonna dive into something. At least for me, is an important conversation. It's the whole relationship between father and son and what that looks like. Obviously, I have our relationship that I kind of use as a reference, I suppose. And then I know the relationship that you've had a little bit with your father. And, so there are obviously difference between when, at that time, what a father was supposed to be, and then during your time as a father, and obviously still a father, but, what a father meant then, and then now, kind of the modern fatherhood and what that means. But obviously our relationship with our fathers can shape how we approach life and all the choices that we make. So how do you think that your relationship with your father has impacted how you have fathered and your own views on fatherhood?
Well, some of the things that I learned was just observing my father and how he lived his life and the things that he would say. One of those in particular had to, just seeing how his view of family and how important that was to him. So much so that he would pull us out of the public school and find a Christian school for us to attend. And that was extremely important for him. And it was a sacrifice for my mom and him to put us kids through a Christian school education. The other thing that I saw was just his work ethic. He worked hard in his job. He also worked hard at home. So there wasn't a lot of connection, as far as doing a lot of things with him, except for working with him around the house with the projects and tasks. It might be building a shed one year or working on a car. And so I would watch him in how he could pursue something and put his mind to it and accomplish it. And just, he didn't have time to sit down and just, watch TV. He didn't have any time to, or feel it was important to invest money in things like snowmobiles and four-wheelers. And not that he didn't take us on family vacations, he did, but he was careful not to invest in a lot of extra things. I think if I talked to him today, he would probably say, well, maybe I should have invested in a few of those things. But at the time, he was very serious about trying to do the best job he could at raising us and leading his family. And I think that influenced me. And in my work ethic, in whether it's serving in the church or whether it was the jobs that I had, just applying how he tackled a task, I can see how that influenced me. It wasn't hard for me to pick up on his example and other men that also showed me that persistence to work, even though you were tired, even though it was difficult, you still pressed on. The other thing was the example my dad gave in placing his faith, although we didn't talk about a lot about his faith, but his example. And the decision was made once. We are going to go to church when the doors are open. And it was never a discussion. We never had a discussion each Sunday on whether or not we were going. We were going. And if the church was open morning and evening and Wednesday as well, then we were there. And we all knew that it wasn't a discussion. It never even crossed our mind. And I appreciate that example because I know that's transferred into, our family, and a lot of times that just making those decisions and not leaving them. Some things don't need to be open for rethought and a decision every time. He was a strong disciplinarian, so I did see that example, but it also helped me also in shaping some other thoughts that I had and how I wanted to raise my family. So although I saw the need for discipline, I also I had some other thoughts and how, I wanted to do it and felt that God would have me, lead my family and maybe in a slightly different way in comparison. But I guess the last thing I'd say is just watching my dad take care of my mom. It showed me that persistence and that commitment and seeing them in good times and difficult times, and how that it was never a question of whether he was going to take care of us or take care of his wife. And he did put her first, and I could see that in wanting to make sure that she was happy and that things were going well. So those are some of the things. I could keep going, but I sense that maybe I've answered that question.
No, you're good, and I think the point of having a conversation like this is, a chance to dive in a little bit more. So, like for work ethic, I definitely think that I remember him talking about him with all of his jobs. Almost every time I saw him, it was always, I had all these jobs, and I was a milk taster. Blew, and then
Yeah,
stories about blowing the fingers off, and
yeah,
but I remember work was a huge thing, and I remember him talk about his jobs when you guys got older. So I do think that definitely transferred over to you. I think the work was different from what he was doing versus
hmm
the work that you've done. Not that your job wasn't physical, but it was a very mental and travel and
hmm
um, I think for a while and even still today, like I see two sides now because I see the side of the father that wants to showcase the work ethic and to provide, but I still remember the sense of, okay, well, would I have preferred that I saw you more if perhaps maybe we had something less, whatever that was. And, I've been really lucky or blessed with the job that I have, especially right now. And even in the past, I've had the opportunity to be available. Like when we were in Charlottesville, the schedule that we have, I was able to be there with him during the morning, and not a lot of people have that. And then now, being able to take an extra third day off, pretty much as long as the business was there and my team was situated. So, I think I've taken that, and I think Emily can attest, like, I've definitely believed my work ethic came from you. Um, and, I can't, I don't want to take that for granted, but I also think it gave me a perspective as well on being around. Do you, as you look back, do you think that you would have done anything differently? Like, would you either a different job that didn't make you travel as much, or being just around more, or traveling more? Or is there anything
Hmm.
that you look back now and think maybe you would have done differently?
Well, looking hindsight is always an interesting perspective. One thing I would say is when I was home, at least what I remember is it was important to me to not be away, if I wasn't traveling.
Hmm.
And so, I never picked up extra hobbies. I didn't go golfing. And I just tried to be there for the family. Were there some periods where I traveled a whole lot more than I would have liked? Yeah, for sure. Especially when you were in your teens and all that extra traveling I was doing, and you were starting college, and getting platinum status on Marriott has its downside, and that is that you're not home. You're away. So there are times when I wish I had more time. The other part is it's tough when you're raising a family, and there are some things that you may like that we decided together to help you pursue, things like soccer. Well, what that did was that all when I was home, that removed opportunity for us to do things other than me taking you, to soccer practice.
Yeah.
So you never know, right? When you're living through it, is that hindsight, would we do it all again? I don't know. It's hard to say, because I think, God led us down the path, and God didn't provide any other job at the moment. And probably as a man who it was important to me to provide for the family, and the thought of searching for a different job, just wasn't, God placed me in this job, and it met, it provided for the families. It gave me I wanted to be a missionary when I was young. And I mean, there's a whole story behind how I ended up with a business administration degree, but got used that desire long ago to give me a position where it allowed me to be overseas and rubbing shoulders with people that didn't know Jesus Christ. And, so I was their witness that they saw, why aren't you like the other guys? And they would ask, why won't you go with us to this place or that place? And that wouldn't have been a good decision, but most men would follow right along. So I felt like God placed me in that kind of job. And a lot of times I just hoped and prayed that when I was home, it would be a sweet time, and that an effective time with my family. And that, so anyway, it's hard to look back and say, well, what would you have done?
Hmm.
We'll get into maybe I didn't have this in my notes, but there's a lot of times I look back in life and you say, it might have been nice to know what was coming, but most of the time I'm glad I didn't know what was coming.
Yeah, that's an interesting way to look at it. Like you said, if you had known that you're gonna have to lose a job to eventually get to Georgia and then South Carolina, that would eventually lead you to Gospel Link.
Hmm.
Like, I'm sure, and a lot of questions like, why can't I just skip all that hardship and just skip to the Gospel
Right,
Link and let's go?
right. What do you teach? You just don't understand what God's doing along the way. And it's not just me as an individual, but, there's a lot of things in play
Yeah,
with the family, with me, and what's coming. And you just, that God's placed you in a position because and nothing else is opening up. And you don't have anybody speaking into your life and saying, you ought to consider this over here. So in most of the time in my career, the job I had was the one I felt God had given me to do, and do as well as I could.
Your dad, I mean, your family, you guys didn't, I know you said you went on vacations, but you didn't travel that much, right?
Well, we didn't travel outside the United States. So, but we did travel around the United States, up to the East Coast and DC, over the West Coast, and down to Tennessee. We didn't do much more south than that. We didn't go that any further
Yeah.
west. But yeah, my dad was excited when I started traveling because in his dream of what his boys would do was he was not going to hold us to the home or to the stay in the community. In his mind, he had raised us to be honorable and respectable men that God would use and take wherever he led them. So he was fully willing to allow us to move on and travel, and he loved that. And even when he got his chance to travel to China, I mean, for then on, one of the main stories we would always hear was his trip to China. Yeah.
Something I saw a long time ago was there's a quote. They say, "Fathers give their sons what they wish that their own fathers gave them,"
Hmm.
and so sometimes creates like this. You're if there's something that your dad did that you wished he did, you provided that to myself or to Caleb. Is there anything that maybe that stands out that you'd be like, yeah, that's something I wish that maybe he did that you feel like maybe you tried a little bit harder to do as myself or Caleb?
I wanted to be present for my sons. More so, I wanted to be available. I wanted them to be able to talk to me because and this is more the way my dad was raised and his father with his relationship with his father. They didn't have that kind of relationship, and so I wanted that. I wanted whether it happened or not. In different times I knew it wouldn't, and sometimes it would. But when I wanted to have that, at least that relationship that I feel I didn't quite have a lot of the time. There were some times when I would have some great conversation with my dad later in life, but I wanted to have that open door at least there. I think that's that's something. I saw a lot of times the stress that he had in his job. It was hard for him not to bring it home. And that's another thing that I tried to fight against, bringing home, that stress and taking it out on the family. Those are just some general things that come to mind.
Well, the whole stress side of things, I don't really remember you bringing much work home with you. When you're home, I remember you being home. So that's pretty cool. Is there, talking about obviously you have Randy, your brother. Do you remember him fathering you two differently, or did he father you both the same way?
Um, I think he would, I would say he fathered us the same. We were 4 years apart. So that meant, when I was finishing high school, he was just starting high school. I was off to college and he was going through his high school years. So there's a lot I didn't see in the most formidable time. Um, I didn't sense that he treated my brother differently, in those younger years. So, and I appreciated that and probably carried on. I try knowingly or not, tried to do the same thing with my kids.
Do you think that obviously our age gap between myself and Caleb, 10 years,
Mhm.
it's pretty considerable. Do you think that you changed or adjusted anything between myself and Caleb?
Well, what I would say is, the principles, that I would say are as much as possible, the rock solid things that are important. I would say that I tried to keep that the same for all of you kids. But I have to say that, yeah, I learn things each time. And, having a child 10 years after you, it's also different. Your perspective in life is totally different. Your energy in life is different. And so that affects maybe how I parented. a bit. But one thing, as far as differences between children, I think it's important that we also don't forget that each child is unique. Each child has its own needs, has its own things that you need to be paying attention to and listening for. So, um, something that was important to me was to listen and watch. So I tried not to just do things just because a book said so or somebody else said this is the way to do it, realizing that, okay, maybe this child needed something, when they were 3 right away. And then I didn't have to deal with that. That was enough. And maybe, for another child that they didn't have the same situation. They didn't seem to need the same level of instruction or guidance in that area. So I didn't have to. I didn't do it just because. It was more watching, well, what's needed. I tried to understand that my job as a parent is to help each unique individual develop and get through and to a point where they could be an adult and hopefully live on their own.
Well, I mean, I think that you've done a great job, and Emily thinks that you've done a great job. I mean, obviously, you and Mom. Obviously, we're probably a little biased, but something that always stands out almost anytime we're talking about something that has to do with you or work or when we were in Zambia is just how patient you were and are, and I think that goes a long way as a parent. Even tonight, we were getting ready to wrapping things up and going to bed, and we had watched part of a movie because it's Friday night. So I was like, we try and watch something. So we're watching Atlantis. And so we watch halfway through, and I was like, okay, buddy, let's go to bed. We're going to read some books. And obviously, there's commercials because, and I look at him, and he doesn't answer. And I look back, and he's staring at this commercial. And I'm like, wake up, hello, I'm talking to you. And Emily's like, it's okay. Just, I'm with them all the time, and so she's a little bit more used to it. But I'm like, she's like, sometimes it feels like you don't have any patience for him. I was like, well, sometimes I have patience for certain things and I don't have patience for other things.
Yeah.
And, but, that doesn't mean like I can't be more patient, but I don't remember there were ever moments where you were not patient ever. Like I remember it was just, there was always patience, even in stuff that maybe, if I look back now, if something happened, maybe I wouldn't be quite as patient, but maybe I should be. But I would say, well, between that and work ethic, I think those were two of the biggest qualities or virtues, principles maybe that stood out for me, whether you meant to or not. Yeah, it definitely stood out. Your career, and I can only assume because I've been working with since working in hospitality, we work with a lot of different people from different backgrounds and ethnicities. So my housekeeping ladies almost all speak Spanish and very little English. Now I'm trying to get them to clean a room, which is one thing. But I can imagine that, all the traveling you had to do with going to China and Thailand and all of that, I'm sure you had to have a lot of patience dealing with the people there. But kind of to go into the whole career, tell us, or I know, but tell those who wouldn't know how you got into going to Thailand at the beginning, I guess.
To Thailand, did you say?
Yeah, the first trip to getting involved with Graco and all that.
Right. So, in life, you never know who those people are or what those influential things are that happen in your life that push you this way or that way. But in college, I had an international relations professor that he just put the book down and he was talking from his heart to all of us. And he said, if you ever get the chance to travel overseas or to take a job as a tent maker, or if you get the opportunity to get out of the United States, take it. And so I never forgot that. And when I was just a young guy at Graco Children's Products, God had arranged, I mean, it wasn't me, God arranged for me to end up in the International Relations Department. I worked for the vice president that was in charge of that, who was also in charge of the factory in Greer, South Carolina. And I had been looking after the bad quality we were getting from Taiwan. And they said, we need somebody to go over to Taiwan to help the office over there understand what good quality is. And I immediately remembered my professor. And of course, my dad, he was no problem. If you ever get I expect you guys to have to take these kind of jobs. And so when I heard that, I told my boss that, yes, basically send me, I'll go. And, they don't get a lot of people back then saying, yeah, send me to a place that you can't speak that's so far away. And so they sent us. I look back at the pictures of Sharon and myself back then. We were so young. We looked like kids, and we were just a few years out of college.
And just real quick, just plug in here. Mom and you both went to college at Bob Jones, but
Yeah,
you never met at Bob Jones. It was
never met there.
after, but you did go to school at the same time.
3 out of the 4 years we were at Bob Jones together.
And
Although
didn't
I
meet at
never met.
all. Not at
It
all.
wasn't time. God knew that it wasn't time for us to meet then.
And then afterwards, she got the job at Graco as well.
Right, at the factory in Greenville. And then I got transferred down to do some work, and they asked if I was willing to transfer. And I was looking at the housing prices up in Pennsylvania, and I just, when will I ever be able to save up enough money to buy a house at these prices?
Why Pennsylvania?
Oh, that's where Graco Children's Products was based. When I was hired by them, they moved me up to Pennsylvania. That's where I started my career.
Okay, I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so you came back down after Pennsylvania to Greenville. So how long was it after school was over did you meet?
So probably about a year and a half after. So I spent about that much up in Pennsylvania, and then transferred down to Greer,
Okay,
South
so
Carolina.
she was right out of college, or because you had
Pretty
been out
close,
for like
yeah.
a year, and then yeah, anything, I don't know, anything you want to share about you two meeting?
Well, it's always interesting how God brings two people together. So, we still smile when we think about how it happened. But, Sharon was excited. She got to rent the car for me. This young single guy that came down from Pennsylvania, and she was the receptionist or the factory secretary. So she got to see me every time I'd walk in that morning. And she called her mom and said, "I think I found the one."
Whoa.
And but I was very stubborn because I wanted this decision to be my decision. So the factory manager was trying to hook us up, and I was not having it. So, but after some months, and we went to the same church together, then I felt comfortable to ask her out.
And then how long was it from the time you guys met, married, and then were leaving? Because if I remember right, it was like a married, time to go, and you guys left.
Well, it wasn't quite that fast, although it probably sounded like it. So we were engaged just for a few months. So we did not have a long engagement. And some of that was because I had said yes to go to Taiwan. I wasn't married yet, but I was dating Sharon. And so there was a bit of pressure. Okay, if you're nervous about making this decision, it's time to man up.
Mm-hmm.
And ask this young lady and her father. And so they all got a big kick out of me as, asking her dad, to marry her. And so then we were married in 1990. And then it was some months later before we moved on to Taiwan. So we had a few months living in the United States to kind of get used to life as a couple.
Oh man. So you had to ask to get married, and oh, by the way, I'm taking your daughter to Taiwan.
Yeah, yeah. You won't see
That's,
her very often.
whew. All right. So now you're in Thailand. So, you kind of touched on it before, as far as like once you got into the position, whatever the position was, it wasn't like, this is what I'm meant to do for the rest of my life. It was more of like, this is what God wants me to do right now. So I'm going to do
Hmm.
it. So I think that's a hard pill to swallow for a lot of people, to think, okay, this is not what I want to do, and keeping that same mentality that it's okay that it's not what I want to do because it's what I feel God wants me to do.
Hmm.
Um, did you ever feel like, I don't know, it seems like you were pretty confident at the time, but did you ever feel like, maybe this isn't what I'm supposed to be doing? Maybe I don't want to do this anymore.
When I was overseas, no. Even after we had your sister and you overseas, I was just having the time of my life. The company paid everything. It was the time of, the hit in history where the expat packages were very good. We didn't necessarily save a huge amount of money. We did save some, but we could travel home anytime. Most of our expenses were covered. The rent of the house was covered. The furniture rental was covered. So we just had to eat.
Good deal.
It was a great deal. And for a young person, that getting that experience, I was in the quality field. So I was in all kinds of factories, assembly factories, material production factories, fabric, textile, cardboard, plastics. It was, Sharon might ask, well, when are we going to go home? I said, well, I don't know. When God, Graco's tired of me being overseas, perhaps. But there was a point when both of you were with us as just young children. Um, we started feeling unsafe. Aaron did, just not comfortable with the medical situation. That's how God kind of moved us
Oh,
back
okay.
to the States, was, and that's kind of how he moves. All of a sudden, everything was fine last month, but now, God's starting, you sense that your heart's being moved and it's time. Although you still don't know necessarily to ask, hey, it's time for me to go home, but you're being prepared for that moment when, okay, it's time.
How would you distinguish between, I want to go home and I feel like God is wanting us to go home? Not necessarily like in this
Yeah.
instance, but Emily and we've moved 5 times. Like we went to South Carolina to New Zealand to Utah,
Hmm.
Virginia to Bastrop
Hmm.
to here. So
Yeah,
five.
you're going to catch us if you keep this up.
So, but for us, and maybe this is something for myself, a conversation I actually just had with Chef Miller. He was talking about the mundane. And I think for us and for myself, that's how I think it feels to me, is when I start to get bored, when I don't feel like I'm learning anything. That's when I feel like it's time for me to either find another position within this hotel, or it's time
Hmm.
for us to move.
Yeah.
Versus Emily, maybe more emotional. Hers is, well, we've got 2 kids now. We've been in this house. I don't, like this particular city, or I like this more than others, and so I want to go home.
Yeah.
So how do you distinguish? You know.
Well, it's interesting when you do allow yourself to have a lot of different changes in life. There were some times when it was my wife saying, it's time, we need to go home. And even though me as a man, I might have said, well, if it was just me, I could stay longer.
Mm-hmm.
But considering my family and understanding her heart and what she was feeling, okay, it's time. And I didn't know what the company would say, but fortunately they allowed us to come back and they found a position for us There was no guarantee of that. Other times, I always wanted to have an impact. I wanted to be able to continue learning, and I'd read books and get excited about things and try to implement them, and I was impacting the company in my role. But like with Graco at the time just before I left, I just didn't feel I was having the same impact. The relationship with the management felt different. Something was changing. And I still, even though I was feeling that, it was still hard for me to say, well, it's time to look for another job. Maybe that's because I didn't watch my father walk through job changes. He stayed with the same company his whole career. So, God had to arrange for me to be laid off at the beginning of a year when the company was needed to reduce cost. And they evaluated and said, well, Ron, you've been training the nationals overseas. They're doing a great job. Quality is good on the products. We have enough quality engineers and so on to maintain. So it's time for you to go. Because I wouldn't have gone on my own, and that was tough. In Zambia, as a missionary, you're a missionary, and you don't go into it saying, well, I'm going to do this just for 2 years or 3 years and I'm done. You go in and say, well, I'm committed. I'm here as long as God will have me here. And I wasn't going to leave. And God arranged a health issue to put me on a plane and put me in the hospital for a few weeks so that I was home, back to the States. And then there was a change. So sometimes you know what's happening and it's time to go. And sometimes God, he gets the hammer out, or he really says, well, it's no doubt, okay, a change is now happening. But it's okay. God will see me through. Even though like when I got laid off, it was the first time I'd ever been laid off after 24 years. That was hard. Even though I knew, God, you must be up to something, but I had to wait like 3 months before the next opportunity showed up, which was amazing. But I couldn't see it at the moment I was laid off. It was tough.
I think I'm trying to think. I mean, I've only been working for Hyatt for 7. I think it's like 7 years now. But I can't imagine being here for 14, 14 years, right? No, whatever that math is.
Mm-hmm.
But I can't imagine being here for another. It's gonna bug me. 17 years. 17 years. Yeah. And then getting laid off after that because I'm not, for whatever reasons. That's yeah. It even after those 3 months were up, did you still, like, even after you found the job, were you still able to get past being let go, or is it just kind of this, does it still linger around? It's like, I was let go once, so.
I think it's always when you invest that amount of time of your life into a company and the people that you work with, anytime you sever that relationship, it's tough. I mean, it's always a bit of a sensitive issue when I think back. Just not really understanding fully why, I know why. I could see God working, but why that way? Because I loved what I did, and I loved, the people I had to work with, especially overseas, but that had to go away. So yeah, it doesn't necessarily leave you, but it becomes part of you. It's part of the experiences that God uses to shape you for the next thing he has for you. And that's kind of how I felt, when I transitioned over to Zambia as a missionary. And looking back, all those hard transitions were getting me ready for what was coming, which, being a missionary, was a whole lot more difficult than traveling to China and these other places and trying to make sure the quality of a stroller or a car seat was excellent. And if I knew what I was going to be headed for, I don't know if I would have chosen the path. So that's sometimes you don't like what you might have to go through, but stay the course.
Was it when it actually came about? So this is Greco, then Georgia, South Carolina with Good Baby, and then and then I can't remember the transition from there to to Zambia.
Hmm.
So how did you end up in Zambia?
Yes. So, so the Good Baby job, a Chinese company with a U.S. branch, was excellent for us because it allowed us to, I could work remote and allowed us to be in Greenville as you guys were going through university. And so when you guys were getting close to graduation, the company, Good Baby, and we felt it was coming, where they were going to ask us to move to Boston or
Hmm.
Columbus, Ohio,
So
or
it was.
China. And I had had my career for then now 30 plus years, and Sharon, loved languages and dreamed of being a missionary and working in language, translation and so on. And so, and I always had that little fire in me that wanted to be willing to be on the mission field if God would lead me there. And so at that point in my life, I knew moving to Boston or Ohio wasn't going to be an easy move. And God was also working on my heart through messages at our church back in Georgia and songs there that would touch my heart about missions again and like the Casting Crowns song, what if I gave everything? And that got me ready and prepared. And so Sharon and we had already arranged to go to the JARS training center, where they would put us through a week-long simulation of being in the jungle and living in the jungle to see if, has God really prepared you to be the, missionary involved in translation or not? Well, we told Sharon's dad that we were considering the mission field. Of course, his ears perked up. He was excited. And he had been working with the Gospel Link Bible College in Zambia as a teacher over the years. And I remember hearing about it. And he'd show us pictures, but that wasn't on my mind at the moment. He said the chancellor or the leader of that Bible college is right here in Hartsville. Do you want? And he knew that they were at a point where they needed somebody like me that was new processes and quality and leadership to help them. So he thought maybe this is an excellent fit. And so we met with the chancellor there in Hartsville, South Carolina. And he said, we'd love to have you guys. What job do you want to do? And so, we prayed about it, considered. Of course, we didn't know what we would choose to do. We just, what do you need? And so eventually we felt confident that God had prepared us. I talked to some mentors. One of them advised us to, you don't need to make a trip. We did have a trip arranged so we could go visit the Bible college. And he advised us, you need to pray and ask God to show you that whether this is what he's calling you to or not before you make the trip. Don't make the trip conditional to making the decision. So we were feeling confident that, yeah, this seems like a good fit. There's a need. And just, I think it was the same week, by that weekend, I got a call from my Good Baby manager, and he said, we want you to consider a promotion, and you'll be the corporate head of quality for our U.S. operation. Where do you want to move? Columbus, Ohio, Boston, Massachusetts, or if you want, you can move to Kunshan, China. And Sharon was listening to the call, and she's like, this is a call from Satan, because we
Yeah.
had decided God had called us to the mission field and we were ready to go. So, but God worked things out where the Good Baby company, a Chinese company, they said, okay, no problem. You don't want to take the promotion. You can keep your current job and we'll pay you right up until the time that you go overseas. And so we saw God provide and affirm the decision. But he also put us through some fire, which sometime, if I've never shared it with you, I'll have to share that with you in getting us finally ready to step foot in Zambia.
Yeah, it sounds like a good story. Now I remember having conversations with you guys about going to Zambia, and the big talk was, well, what about Caleb? And I know you mentioned your thought process was, if we go, I'm all in. Uh, I don't remember, like, I remember having conversations with mom about it, and I don't know if I remember her being so resolute that I'm all in for however long. Were there conversations that you guys had about that, or was it, maybe it wasn't so clear until the health scare that maybe that's how she actually was feeling? Or because obviously you're leading, or you led our family, and then you led mom and Caleb to Zambia, so you're the leader. But how did you work with, I feel like I'm supposed to be here, God's calling us to be here for however long it takes, and maybe a little hesitancy of maybe I'm not, you know
Mm-hmm.
just obviously with Caleb, and then with mom.
So, I don't know how to walk through this and explain the story in a concise way. But AJ, what I would say is that initially we were both all in. And part of the fire that we had to walk through is that as time went on, as a couple, we were starting to struggle a little bit because of some of the fire that we were, the refining fires that we were being asked to go or brought through in preparation for the trip. So that's probably what you saw a little bit from the outside, whether, and there were it wasn't just from one area, and there were some areas that were extremely hard. In the work on the mission field, I can look back now and because when we stepped foot there, we were being rejected. And even in the process of raising funds and so on, there was a lot of rejection from places that we never expected, which made it hard. And there were other refining things that occurred, which in the end, Sharon, as a wife, was very supportive. And, and, we were, we stepped foot in Zambia. I think we always worried, and I think any missionary couple, they need a lot of prayer because when they're bringing kids with them or they have kids, that's a complexity because the kids, it's not necessarily the kids calling, and the sacrifice that a missionary is making to be on the field, it's a default, the child is part of that. And the hope that I had as a father on the mission field was that, God, I don't know what's ahead. This is so extreme. I'd get to Tuesday and it felt like a whole week had gone by because it was I was on call all the time, living on campus, out in the bush with, 100+ people on campus that are looking up to me. So I knew that I was going to struggle to give everything to my family. And I just hoped and prayed that, God, would you please take care of them? And I tried to be like I did before. I tried to be present with them when I could, but to really feel and solve all the issues and emotions that they were feeling. There's probably still today some that I'm not aware of that they went through. While I was out trying to help a school and being a dad to 100 college students in a foreign land, they were struggling, just with growing up, on the mission field, and how do I be a supportive wife on the mission field? And So it was a rough time. God knew that we could only handle it for 2.5 years.
So that brings us now. So the 2.5 years, the health scare. Now I remember it, but I do not remember it being as bad as I later found out that it was. I don't know if that was on purpose or what, but yeah, when I found out how bad it was, I was like, well, you guys didn't tell me. Like, I would have came, I would have flown. Like, so that bugged me a little bit, but I'm sure there were reasons.
Yeah, well, when you're in the thick of it and you're just trying to hold on for the next day and trying to figure things out, it's hard to you're not thinking. And so, I mean, they were already worried about me because of the stress levels. It was probably hurting me to some respect physically, but I got a virus from a mosquito, and that the doctors couldn't figure out. It was about a 10-day where you had the extreme symptoms, and they didn't test me for that virus because it was during COVID time. And what that meant is that I ended up in the hospital, and they were trying to figure out what was wrong with me because I was, I mean, I didn't look well. I wasn't functioning well. I'd sweat like crazy, shakes, couldn't sleep, and they thought I had a blood clot in my lung. They thought maybe I had cancer. They thought, they didn't know if I was going to make it. They didn't know if they had to ship me up to Europe or down to South Africa. So anyway, it was rough. And during COVID, nobody can visit you. So I was all alone in the both hospital locations. So, and I guess it had to get that bad for me to basically for them to finally work out the deal with the insurance company, because we didn't have insurance for the United States as a missionary. We just had insurance international. So they had to negotiate something with the insurance company to allow us and cover us if they brought me back to the United States for treatment. And they still didn't know what was wrong with me, even though the fever stopped the day that I stepped on the plane to come back to the States. But I still had another week in the hospital for them to poke and prod and take blood and try to put me through MRIs and bone marrow tests and to determine what was wrong. But the missionary doctor, thought I was done. She thought there's something extremely wrong. All this stress must be creating something terrible.
Mm-hmm.
And so as a doctor, she thought that I might not make it. And Sharon didn't know really how bad I might have looked or felt, because she couldn't come and see me. She couldn't be with me in the hotel or in the hospital room. So she was relieved once we got back to the States because my fever was gone. Didn't have the symptoms like I did. They just needed to figure out what happened and is there something still there?
Mm-hmm.
Am I going to pull out of this and regain my strength? Because by then I was pretty weak. So anyway, I'm sorry we didn't get the word to you, but it was tough. It was a hard. I mean, it's funny. I look like, surely, Lord, couldn't you have just given me a note? I would have listened to the right person. Couldn't there have been somebody that just said, I know you think it's time to stay because you think the job isn't done, but it's time. It's okay. You're not a failure for heading home right now. You need to go. But instead, I got this silent little tiny mosquito that was not supposed to be in Zambia during COVID time that nobody would find. I got to be in the hospital, and I'd never been in the hospital before for anything. I broke my little finger as a kid. That was it. And now I'm experienced to everything. I couldn't find anyway, I could go on and on. But yeah, sorry we didn't get the word to you.
It's all
I
good.
know you would have been there, but it was crazy.
Yeah.
I'm glad I don't want to go through it again. If God brings another round of this, I don't know what I will do because I don't want to experience it again.
Speaking about health, um, so right now, obviously, not obviously, but for us, your father has several health issues, and that you don't have to get into it if you don't want to, but just health in general as you get older, and has the health of your parents, has it made you change anything about diet or exercise, or how you even view
Mhm.
yeah.
Well, I mean, my father's example. I mean, he was always active out in around the house. He would mow a ditch bank that was, more than an acre long. He used to ride his bicycle to work, and he lost a lot of weight. He stopped because some people were getting killed that were, they're on a bicycle. People were running into him. And he thought, again, family is important to him. So even though he wanted to lose weight, he didn't want to put himself in a position where his family might not have a father or a breadwinner anymore. So I watched my father, at least maintain his weight generally. But even so, he still ended up with heart issues. He still ended up with diabetes. His dad had dementia and Alzheimer's, and he's close to that same. He was just diagnosed with Alzheimer's now. So what I would say is, I there are different phases that you go through in life or situations. Sometimes you have the opportunity to focus on your health and exercise and watch what you eat. And there are other times when, it's just not, the opportunity's not there. The life situation's not aligned properly, so to speak. And for me, like traveling and so on, I didn't have to worry about it. I would try to exercise in the hotels, and I would try go on long walks. I used to do that a lot in China and Taiwan, Taipei. But generally speaking, I could eat a Wendy's and a McDonald's and it wouldn't bother.
Hmm.
No, fast forward to now in my late 80s, almost 60, it gets harder as you get older. The metabolism changes, and it's hard not to get discouraged because what used to work, I remember times when I could do this and I would lose 5, 10 pounds, no problem. But now it doesn't work. The virus that I got hurts my joints. It's not constant, but it moves around. So now the shoulder, I had some fitness training,
Hmm.
but I hurt my shoulders. It took me longer to recover from that than the fitness training I had. So what I gained, I lost. So I guess what I would say, just now I'm almost 60, like the Bible says, fitness and health, and focusing on that, it's not a bad thing. It's a good thing, but it's not the number one thing. I wouldn't put it ahead of my family. I wouldn't put it ahead of my kids. So, and I watched many people just dedicate their life, even my folks. I mean, they changed their whole eating regimen
Yeah.
when they lost their daughter. They thought, well, maybe it's the food we've chosen to eat. Maybe that was the cause. So we changed the whole diet. But people still get that same disease, and it has nothing to do with the food necessarily. We watched other people just go crazy and dedicating their life to different health pathways, and they still get cancer.
Hmm.
So, you need to take care of yourself. Don't be discouraged, though, when there are times in life when you don't have the time, when the priorities of life don't leave an opening for that. Do the best you can with what, the body that God has given you. And that's physical, mental, all of that. But to go to the extreme, I'm not seeing that as being a healthy thing,
Yeah.
even though you might lose some weight for a period of time. You got to balance it out. with the priorities in life and what God has given you to do and the type of life that God's laid in front of you. That's kind of what I would say. So like right now, I said, okay, I'm tired of the weight. I haven't gone higher than I've ever weighed, but I'm knocking on the door and I'm not eating that much, and so I say, well, it's just not fair. It's not right. So, Sharon and I, it's always good to have somebody supporting you, and especially in the same house, because,
Mm-hmm.
I'd always tell her, I mean, however you think you want to eat, I'm okay with it. You don't have to fix two different things for me.
Mm-hmm.
One for you and one for me. We can do it together. And so I told her we need to make a change. I knew this man back when I was in high school in our church. All of a sudden, he slimmed down. And we went over at his house and he explained what he had done. He said, I don't eat until I'm hungry. And then I read something recently that said, once you feel hungry, wait an hour, then eat. So it's counter US culture because you're supposed to eat, at this hour,
Mm-hmm.
this hour, and this hour. But I'm trying that now.
Okay.
Because also the other idea is, well, you need different ideas and try different things at different phases in your life. So
Mm-hmm.
let's give it a try. It's not going to hurt.
Yeah.
We still are eating healthy. I'm just not eating at the same time traditionally, which is a psychological hurdle
Yeah. I feel like that's hard.
because your brain is saying, well, you're supposed to, whether you're hungry or not, now's the time to eat. So, but really, the other thing is I can't snack.
Mm.
I got to be careful with the coffee, which I learned to enjoy late in life. Because why? Well, because that keeps my body thinking that it's satisfied, it doesn't need anything. So it's not, now that metabolism has changed, it's not burning off that extra fat that's hanging on because I'm keeping it in a state of thinking it's taken care of throughout the day. So I'm trying to break that. I guess I'd say it's a constant battle, at least for someone that doesn't have an automatic metabolism
Mm-hmm.
that's going to do it for them. That's just not in my heritage. So I have to be careful and I have to not give up. But also, there's more to life than fighting some of these things constantly. So I know I have to keep it in balance. So if my wife wants to go out to eat,
Mm-hmm.
even though I know when I come home, she may have regrets, but we together, we needed a time to go out. And culturally, there aren't many other opportunities. You go out to a nice restaurant and then you eat and you enjoy something together. What are you going to go? Just eat an appetizer together? We're not there yet.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that helps, AJ, but there were times I was successful and times I wasn't. And, it's a battle to make sure that you are taking care of yourself. Same goes for seeing the doctor. As a man, why bother?
Yeah.
The examples, even in business, is, well, if the truck isn't broken yet,
Yeah.
keep driving it. And so going to a doctor for an annual checkup, at different times, it's been a battle,
Mm-hmm.
to worry about myself.
Yeah. I feel like I could be wrong, but the older Christian mindset was I don't need to think about myself at all. I need to take care of everyone else.
Hmm.
And I think
Yeah,
I think it's changing a little, at least a little bit for the good, because it's like, well, if I'm going to be able to take care of everybody else,
right. I need to.
I need to be working and I need to
Hmm.
be, in a good spot. So that's
Yeah, it's true.
something I think, I don't know, it was probably the beginning or right before the beginning of the year. I was just kind of relooking at a few things, and one of them was it was something simple, but I was just looking at, I have been intermittent fasting, I guess you could say, just kind of
Hmm.
now, it's just kind of what I do when I'm at work. I won't eat until 10. and then I stop eating at 8. And then when I'm home, I will have breakfast, because before I wouldn't have breakfast with Emily and August. And so they would sit down to eat their breakfast, and then that'd be like at 7:30. And then I wouldn't eat until 10. They're eating and I'm just either sitting there or not really a part of it. I'm just kind of around. Maybe I'm starting to work on something around the house. And so I felt like I was missing out on this opportunity to sit down and be a part of the family.
Yeah.
And so that's something I've kind of had to modify a little bit and kind of relook at, what, if Emily and I go out somewhere and I have a good meal, I don't want to feel that regret that
Hmm.
from afterwards. And it's not that I don't want to. I'm not looking out for my health, but it's looking at the bigger picture of what kind of a man do I want to be? Do I want to be the kind of man that goes to a restaurant and makes my wife feel bad because I'm eating like a side salad and she wants a full dinner, and then she wants ice cream, and I go and order ice cream, but then I don't get one for myself. Like, I don't think that's not a good way to live. I still want to be able to enjoy life, but how can I work the two in?
Yeah.
That's kind of helped me a little bit with my mindset a little bit. Definitely not perfect, but yeah, I think it's good. And even with Matthew, with his diagnosis, like you said, people make these great big changes in their diet. You can, depending on who you talk to, some people might have said, well, they shouldn't have done that because it took away from them getting nutrients from this. You should have done this
Yeah.
instead. But at the same time, it's like, well, you should be doing something, right? If, a lot of people are saying that this is bad and you do it anyway, and then something bad happens, like, you can't be upset. Like, you did the thing they said that you shouldn't do. So why are you upset that you are this or that or diagnosed?
Yeah.
Obviously, we are going a little bit longer than maybe we had thought. I mean, I'm not really surprised, because I know when we've had conversations where we have had time to actually talk, we can talk. So now's your opportunity to to let it all out. Again, not that it's a bad thing, but just personalities and all that. So I guess to finish out here, um, I've talked to a lot of the guys who have been on this podcast about legacy, and what kind of a legacy do you want to leave for the family, for life, for faith? And we didn't even really touch too much on faith as a subject necessarily, but so what does a legacy look like for you?
Right. Well, just you mentioned faith. Realize that faith is important. You're going to have times when you need to make a decision as a father, as a parent, as a husband, or as an employee or whatever, and you're not going to feel completely comfortable, or it's going to be uncharted territory. It is trust, especially if you've given yourself time, you've not rushed into it. You believe this is what I need to do. Press on. God will help you through it. And like in Zambia, what I learned is, even though I didn't know what was coming, it's a culture I wasn't familiar with, and I knew even in the times when I didn't know what was next, whether or not the witch doctor was going to come and cause somebody harm on campus. I knew that I could trust God and have faith that whatever the circumstance was that was coming, that He would see us through, and He would give me wisdom as the leader that He had on campus to help me know what I needed to do next or what I needed to say. And so faith will be important to your life. Your spiritual health is critically important, because if that's not right, you're not going to have much faith. So be in God's Word, study it. Only recently in my life could I say that I had a regular Bible study on a daily basis. And that was because I was partnering with another group of men, and we were helping to hold each other accountable. make decisions once, the important decisions, like whether or not you take your family to church, that it's not something you have to revisit over and over again. The sacrifices that you make for your family and to serve the Lord wherever He directs you are worth it. So don't shy away from those opportunities and what you're called to do in life, and even in my career as a quality manager. Many times, and even in Zambia as a missionary, many times things turn out to not be as bad as they appear to be initially. Now, there are some times when I realize that things can be that bad, but I would say the majority, more than the majority of the time, almost 100% of the time, it's never as bad as it initially seemed. So you don't need to react quite as, with hysteria, but keep yourself calm and God will lead you through it. So don't be afraid to seek advice. Trust God through each phase of your life. Each phase will be different, unique, and it's going to cause you to trust Him. You will feel, whether you end up on your knees or not, you will feel that He's bringing you to your knees, because you realize you can't do this on your own. So those would be some of the thoughts that I have.
All great thoughts, and hopefully not only myself, but anybody else listening can take it to heart as well. I feel like the conversations that I've had with people that maybe I'm a little bit closer with, I think, maybe at least during the conversations, I think, oh, well, because I know him, it's going to impact me the most. But I think that's the whole point of the podcast is I believe there are important things that you have to share and that other people have to share that, they may not always have a platform to share it. And so hopefully the few podcasts that I do, hopefully we're able to provide that platform. So thank you again for joining us this morning with 3H. And, maybe we'll probably have you back on to finish some of these other topics that are conversations, maybe dive into the challenges you guys had when you're getting ready to go to Zambia, maybe diving into, well, I think there are plenty of opportunities and topics. But for now, thank you again.
Yeah, thank you, AJ.
Yeah. And for those listening that stuck with us through the end, please like, subscribe, and share. And we'll see you all next time. Thanks.